Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Tragic Fall. The sea mist came off Westport in soft folds that evening, pressing itself against windows and dampening the cries of the gulls. From the clifftop, Grant Manor looked theatrical, its facade lit by the last slant of September light, its gilded balcony catching a final gleam as the sun slid into cloud. The household moved in careful patterns, a footman drawing curtains, a cook scolding a pan, a maid hurrying along a corridor with starched linen that smelt faintly of lavender and iron. At 7:15 the grandfather clock in the hall struck, each note well-bred and measured. In the hush that followed came, from somewhere above, a single dragging scrape. It was the sound of wood protesting under strain, the sort of small domestic noise that can be blamed on old houses and fickle weather. Then there was a second sound, far less ordinary, a muffled exclamation, sharply cut, as if the speaker's mouth had been snatched away from his own words. Clara Simmons, the junior maid, was in the morning room, turning down the gas and polishing smears from the mantel glass. She paused, one hand still upon the tap, and looked towards the French doors that opened onto the terrace. She would later say that she felt the air change, that the quiet seemed suddenly to lean in, listening. She almost reached for the handle to look out. But she didn't. She told herself it was nothing, that the masters upstairs were forever moving chairs and shifting trunks. She lowered the flame, smoothed the cloth, and bent to retrieve a dropped matchstick. By the time she straightened, the world had altered. A heaviness fell through it, followed by a sickening thud, not loud but final, a noise that belonged to the end of something. Clara dropped the matchbox and ran, opening the terrace doors with both hands. The mist met her like cool breath. Below the balcony, on the paved sweep above the lower garden, lay a man in evening dress, his right arm absurdly flung across his chest as if in last-minute modesty. A shock of grey hair was slicked back from a pale, surprised forehead. His shoes shone, he had always insisted upon polish. His eyes, once quick as coins, now held only the sea. Clara's breath snagged. "Mr. Grant, sir." No answer. Her call travelled thinly into the mist and broke. The gilt of the balcony rail above caught a faint tremor of light, and something small gleamed upon the boards at its edge. She noticed it, then forgot it at once, for she was kneeling, and the stones were cold, and someone was shouting behind her. Footsteps approached at speed, the butler, Fraser, his steadiness disarranged, then Mrs. Evelyn Grant, the widow-to-be, who had come down for dinner already jewelled and composed, and who now held the doorframe as if the house itself might tilt. "Harold," she said, and the bare name was peculiar in her mouth, as though she were tasting a fruit she had once enjoyed and now found bitter. "Call the police," Fraser managed, though it took him 2 attempts to get the words around his breath. "Call them at once. And fetch a rug. Miss Simmons, do not touch him." Evelyn did not move. Her eyes were high and distant, fixed on the balcony from which her husband had fallen. "He has been unhappy," she said in a small voice, as if nervous of interrupting the scene with too much reality. "He has worried. Anyone could see it. It is so dreadfully easy to—" She stopped, hands tightening around the frame until the knuckles blanched. "Oh, do something, Fraser." Something was done. A footman ran. A neighbour's telephone was used. In less than half an hour Inspector Collingwood arrived. He wore his serviceable tweed and carried a notebook that never left the warmth of his pocket. He was one of those policemen who had learned to hold grief at arm's length without offending it. He examined the body with professional economy, saw nothing to be done, and drew a breath that acknowledged 2 facts: the man was dead, and he had not died in bed. "Mr. Harold Grant," he said, confirming the obvious. "A fall from the balcony." Fraser bowed his head. "Sir." Was anyone with him? Evelyn spoke quickly, gratefully, as though a prompt had been provided. No one. He went to his study after dressing. He does that sometimes, before dinner. I was attending to the table. We heard the noise, Inspector, and then this. Anyone hear voices? An argument. Clara made a small movement that had nothing to do with speech, a twitch of the shoulders, a blink. Collingwood noticed, not unkindly. Well. No, sir, she said, and then, with an honesty that betrayed her, I heard a scrape. On the balcony, I think. As if someone had dragged a chair. But I didn't see. Collingwood nodded once. He turned towards the house, contemplating the gold-painted rail above, the curve of the stone steps, the wet patch where mist had condensed on metal and run. We'll go up, he said. And we'll need the doctor. Fraser, keep everyone inside, if you please. They went up by the carved staircase that had impressed visiting gentlemen for decades and irritated everyone who had to dust it. On the landing the carpet muffled footfalls like a confidant. The French doors to the balcony were ajar, as if politeness had held them open for someone expected to return. Beyond, the mist curled, trying to look in. Collingwood crouched at the threshold. He did not have the gloved hands of a laboratory man, but he had the sense to leave the obvious untouched. He saw the scuff upon the gilt rail, a pale, elongated mark where shin or shoe had rubbed away the paint, exposing the duller metal beneath. 2 feet along, the gilding was nicked, a tiny bite taken from it. He straightened, eyes moving to the floorboards just inside the doors. There, a small disc lay with uncomplicated innocence, a button of dark horn, ordinary, perfectly ordinary, except that ordinary things do not choose their own resting places. Fraser, he called. Who has access to the balcony? Mr. Grant most evenings, sir. Mrs. Grant occasionally. Any of the staff might pass in the course of their work, but we are not in the habit of loitering there. Quite. Collingwood's gaze shifted to the sea, a flat pewter band, then to the garden below where Clara still hovered, hands clenched in the rug she had been too late to use. The doctor, he murmured, and then we shall see. He had, it must be said, a serviceable mind, the sort that carries a problem like a basket rather than like a burden. But even while he looked and noted and kept people from doing foolish things, he was thinking of the man staying at the Westport Hotel, the man with the egg-shaped head and the wax moustaches, the man whose reputation had a habit of arriving a few minutes before he did. Collingwood had met him once on a London case that would have gone wrong if left to its own devices. He was not a superstitious man, but he had formed the habit of trusting to expertise where it existed. Therefore, at 8:30, as the doctor's verdict placed death at roughly the time the clock had chimed, Inspector Collingwood stood in the hotel lobby, watching the guest list turn towards him. It was not a long list. Westport in September is more appealing to fishermen than to tourists. And there it was, neat and unassuming, Monsieur Hercule Poirot. The man himself was in the lounge, tilted towards the lamp like a sunflower. He wore a light grey suit that made him look like a well-swept morning and a tie whose knot could have passed inspection at a military parade. At his elbow stood a small cup of coffee, and beside that, in symmetrical alignment, a slice of lemon tart. He had been reading a program for a local concert, which he folded so precisely that the creases might have been inked. Inspector Collingwood, Poirot said, rising. His voice was warm and European, with that careful courtesy that makes listeners feel taller. How good to see you, though your face, it tells me it is not for pleasure. Sit, I beg you. You will share with me the tiny pastry? None? Then allow me to be selfish. There's been a death, Collingwood said simply. Mr. Harold Grant. A fall from his balcony. It may be suicide. It may not. Poirot's eyes registered interest before concern, as if his intellect were a servant that had darted ahead to open a door. He sat, steepled his fingers, and looked inward. A balcony is a treacherous stage upon which many performances can be given, he said. One must inspect the scenery. We've the doctor's time of death, about 7:15. A scuff on the rail. A button on the floor inside the doors. His wife says he was low in spirits. Wives, said Poirot, with a delicate tilt of the head, say many things that are true and many that are convenient. And what do you say, mon ami? Collingwood hesitated. It could be suicide. He had money worries, perhaps. But something in the air of the place is wrong. The little things? That button, for one. Poirot smiled, faint but unmistakable. The little things are the ambassadors of truth. They arrive clothed in insignificance but carry the passport of certainty. Come, let us not keep them waiting. My hat, if you please. As they stepped into the night, the mist thinned, revealing a sliver of moon like a thumbnail gently scraping at cloud. Westport's lamps made neat pools along the street, and the sea, in the distance, breathed with the slow assurance of something that has seen worse. Poirot walked with small, exact steps, his cane tapping softly, a man who trusted the world to stay where he had last left it. You are on holiday? Collingwood asked. OUI, said Poirot, but the holidays, they take themselves. I merely accompany them. Besides, the grey suits me. And I confess, Inspector, I grow curious. A balcony, a scuff, a button, 3 notes only, yet perhaps a melody. We shall see if the music is happy or sad. Grant Manor, when they reached it, stood as it had stood before the fall, composed, tastefully lit, a house that had long ago decided it was not to blame for human behaviour. Fraser admitted them with a grief that was as dignified as a black tie. The household waited in that particular silence which belongs to good furniture and bad news. Evelyn Grant rose from a chair with the precision of a woman who had trained herself not to crumple. Monsieur Poirot, she said, holding out a cool hand. We are grateful. My husband, Harold, was not himself these last weeks. If he did this thing, I should like it known that he was not a coward, only tired. I cannot think how to bear it otherwise. Poirot bowed. Madam, I offer you my sympathy, he said gently. I shall look, I shall listen, and I shall not assume. That is my promise. His eyes travelled, quick and careful, absorbing the set of the chairs, the smudge on the glass, the overfull ashtray by the side table, the faint drag mark on the rug leading to the French doors. He did not approach them yet. He stood quite still and, in the stillness, seemed to grow a fraction taller. Inspector, he said softly, kindly take me to the balcony. And above the garden where the mist still lay like a thin blanket, the gilt rail waited, holding the shape of the truth as faithfully as metal can. Chapter 2, Poirot surveys the scene. The corridor to the balcony was a tunnel of soft carpet and faint perfume. Poirot paused halfway, his head slightly cocked, as if listening not for sound but for the shape of silence. He drew a handkerchief and, with fastidious care, pressed the brass latch to swing the French doors wider. Mist eddied in, curious and chill. Do not crowd the threshold, if you please, he said, without looking round. It is like a page that has not yet been smudged. Let us read it first. Inspector Collingwood halted with the obedient patience of a man who likes results more than he likes being in charge. Fraser stopped behind him, grave as a lectern. Clara, hovering at a respectful distance, clutched a folded rug as if it were a passport to steadiness. The balcony itself was handsome in an old-fashioned way, its floor laid with weathered boards, its rail a sweep of gilt that gleamed even in poor light. Beyond, the garden fell away in terraces and curves, the sea murmuring at the base of the world. Poirot's eyes moved from threshold to rail and back again, making a neat circuit. He did not hurry. He crouched, rose, took 2 small steps, and crouched again, an exact little machine testing each gear. "Bon," he murmured. "We begin here. The doors." He indicated the lower frame with a fingertip that did not quite touch it. "Do you see, Inspector? A faint arc in the dust, someone has opened and shut with the toe. A gentleman who wishes to avoid fingerprints, or a person whose hands are, how do you say, otherwise occupied." Collingwood bent, squinting. "I see a track, yes." "And here," Poirot continued, "a smear at the height of the latch. Not the clean line of a palm, no. The softness of cloth. A sleeve brushed it. The cloth was not fine, it has left a whisper of itself." He produced a small envelope from his pocket and coaxed into it 2 tiny fibers lifted on the corner of his handkerchief, one pale, one dark as night. He sealed the packet and wrote upon it with a stubby pencil, "Balcony, door latch fibers." He stepped over the threshold with dainty precision and stood upon the balcony boards as if he feared to wake them. He looked down. "There is dust," he said thoughtfully, "but also, see, the powder of the sea, salt that has crystallized. And here, impressions." 2 sets of partial prints lay ghosted in the grey film, one nearer the door, pointing outward, the other at a slight diagonal, toes angled towards the rail. Between them, the grain of the wood showed a blurred streak, as if a shoe had slid. "Footmarks," Collingwood observed. "Yes, but do not be too eager. They are not enough to tell a tale by themselves. We ask, rather, are they the footmarks of one man, or of 2? He brought out a thin tape and measured the gaps. "This spacing is the stride of a taller person," he said, indicating the diagonal set. "The angle, look, suggests a turn to the right. And near the door, the stride is shorter, someone, perhaps shorter, standing, moving only a little." He rose, dusting his trousers with quick, disapproving swipes. "I make no declaration yet. But the balcony has hosted at least 2 pairs of feet tonight." He went to the rail. The gilding was a little battered with age, but one section had been scraped, a pale slit the length of a hand. Poirot examined it with the tenderness a violin maker gives to a scratch on varnish. With a penknife he flicked free a speck of paint and held it to the light. "Fresh," he said. "You see the brightness? This tiny wound on the rail, it has not had time to dull. Someone rubbed hard here, recently. If a man leans to look down, he does not do this." He set his palm against the rail, fingers spread, and leaned forward. His sleeve remained unmarked. To scrape so, one must be pressed. Collingwood folded his arms. Pressed against it, or pressing someone else. Poirot's eyes warmed. "Just so." He bent again where the gilt dipped, and his gaze sharpened. Caught in the nick was a single thread, nearly invisible, a hair's breadth of woven life. He teased it free and placed it beside the fibers in the envelope, then tapped gently along the rail with his knuckle. Here a dent, shallow but definite. A ring might make such a mark if a hand struck the rail in sudden effort. "Doctor," he called, remembering the man downstairs, "has he preserved the fingernails?" Collingwood nodded. "I asked him to. Habit from bad cases. Très bien. We will hope for a little gilt below the nail. It speaks, the gold, when it is torn." He straightened and looked down, measuring with his eye the distance from rail to stones. "Where did the body fall, precisely?" Collingwood indicated. Poirot shut one eye on a lined rail. Terrace edge, flower bed, and the spot with the slow pleasure of a man tying a perfect bow. He paced a small square upon the boards, then returned to the rail and set his heel into the faint slide mark until his foot fitted like a key in a lock. "The geometry, it is important," he said softly. "A suicide, he chooses his place, he climbs, he sits or stands, he looks down. The trajectory is clean. A struggle that is messy. The angle is wrong. The landing, it speaks of a body propelled, not dropped. But I will not preach before I have prayed, Hein. He smiled. Forgive an old man his metaphors. He moved back to the threshold and knelt, his knees making no more sound than thoughts. From the skirting, a dark disk winked up, the button Clara had glimpsed and forgotten. Poirot slid a cardboard visiting card beneath it and lifted card and button together, like a conjurer revealing that there has been no trick at all. He studied it in his palm. Horn, he said. Dark, of decent quality, with a rim. Sewn with stiff thread, now broken in a hurry. See how the stitch has frayed in a little tuft? It was pulled, it resisted, it surrendered. It did not simply fall. This button came away in a struggle. Whose? Collingwood asked. That, said Poirot, is the happy question. Mr. Grant dressed for dinner in evening clothes? Such buttons are covered, smooth, and seldom of horn. This is from a lounge coat, perhaps, or a heavier jacket, the kind a man throws on for cool air. We shall make the inventory of everyone's buttons, comme Illinois fort. He turned the disc under the lamp until it gave up a faint smudge of something along its rim. Boot polish, perhaps. Or coal dust? None, too fine. Shoe cream, then, the good sort. Interesting. He placed the button in a second envelope and wrote, button from threshold. He stood, brushing at a non-existent speck on his sleeve. Madam Grant, he said, turning, would you be so kind as to tell me who was upon the balcony this evening, besides your husband? Evelyn, who had watched from a chair with that rigid poise that passes for calm when one cannot afford collapse, raised her chin. No one, Monsieur Poirot. We were dressing. I came down early to compose myself. Harold prefers 10 minutes of air before dinner. He often stands there alone. Alone, Poirot repeated gently. And the doors, who opened them? I believe he did, said Evelyn. They are usually closed otherwise. Fraser, who had been weighing his words with butlerly caution, now offered one. Beg pardon, sir, but I came along the corridor at 7, to check the lamps. The doors were shut then. I heard Mr. Grant in his study, not here. I went on. At perhaps 10 minutes past, Miss Simmons passed carrying the silver. She would have seen whether the doors were open. Clara startled at the sound of her name. They were ajar, sir, she said, looking at Poirot, not at Fraser. Not much. Just enough that the curtain moved. Merci, mademoiselle, said Poirot. He turned back to the rail and, quite suddenly, leaned very close, as though confiding in it. Who touched you last? He asked the gilt softly, and with the same softness he lifted his head, inhaled, and let the air tell him what it knew. There is the salt, he said, and the damp of the mist. There is, yes, cigarette smoke, very faint, and not from the American sort, something more delicate, Turkish perhaps. Does Mr. Grant smoke? Cigars, said Fraser. A mild Havana, sir. Not cigarettes. And madam? Evelyn's lips curved without warmth. I detest smoke. Poirot nodded, unsurprised. Then the cigarette belongs to another. He moved inside, his attention widening to the room like a lens being opened. The rug showed a subtle drag in its pile, a little river running from the center towards the doors. He knelt again and traced it with a forefinger. Someone pulled something across here. Or someone's foot scraped as he was forced backwards. Look, 2 tiny grains of soil lodged in the pile. Here and here. Mr. Grant changed his shoes before dinner? He would not bring the garden into the drawing room. Fraser confirmed it. Polished and ready, sir. He was particular. Exact men sometimes die because they refuse to be untidy in other people's chaos, Poirot said, almost to himself. Tell me, Inspector, who else was in this part of the house at the time? We will not ask for alibis, we will ask for habits. Mrs. Grant in the dining room, Collingwood began. Mr. Grant's son, Michael, arrived this afternoon, took a turn in the garden after changing. The business partner, Mr. Richard Hale, is staying 2 doors down the lane. He was expected to dinner. The cook and the footman were below stairs. Miss Simmons, here. And Fraser, of course. BN. We will talk to each of them, but quietly. We will not startle the birds from the hedge. A murderer, he prefers his courage plump, we must let it grow thin. He turned once more to the balcony, as if reluctant to leave its orderly truths for the disorder of human testimony. One last thing, he said, and reached up to the inside top of the door frame. His fingers found a notch, and from it he plucked a small, translucent flake. He held it up, it caught the light and flashed. Varnish, he said. From a fingernail. A clear coat, nicely kept. Not Mr. Grant's. Evelyn's hand, resting on her lap, tightened. Poirot put the flake into a third envelope and tucked all 3 inside his breast pocket with a little pat, as though they were birds he meant to keep warm. He looked at the room, the doors, the rail, the mist which, having seen enough, was beginning to retreat. His voice, when he spoke, was almost cheerful. We have our opening, he said. A button, a scrape, a cigarette that does not belong, and a whisper of polish and varnish. The stage is set. Collingwood glanced at him sidelong. Suicide, he asked, because he had to. Poirot's eyebrows rose together, neat as a pair of commas enclosing a thought. Inspector, he said, if a man chooses to die, he does not quarrel with the geometry. He does not leave half a footprint and a struggle for a button. No. Someone came to this balcony with Mr. Grant. Someone told him a thing he did not like to hear, or pressed him upon a matter he would not bend to. They stood close. They fought without noise. And in the end, he gestured, small and exact, towards the empty air beyond the rail. In the end, one man had the greater will, or the greater fear. He offered Evelyn a small bow that was sympathy made elegant, then turned to the door. Now, he said briskly, we shall have coffee, if you please. A very small cup. And we shall talk, one by one, of little things, habits, buttons, cigarettes. It is in the little things that murderers, like poor tailors, make their worst mistakes. Chapter 3, The Household of Suspects. The drawing-room of Grant Manor had been prepared for morning before anyone had given the order. Curtains were drawn, lamps lit with a respectful dimness, and the air thickened by the silence of those gathered there. Hercule Poirot, with his delicate air of ceremony, entered as though presiding over a soiree. Yet his eyes, sharp and bright, missed nothing, not the way Evelyn Grant's hands tightened around a handkerchief too clean to have been used, nor the footman's attempt to stand invisible in a shadow. Inspector Collingwood, practical and less given to theatre, cleared his throat. If you please, we'll have a word with each of you. One at a time. Poirot inclined his head. Yes, but not as a policeman asks questions. None, I ask as a friend who listens. Let us not frighten, but coax. A bird sings sweeter when it is not aware of the cage. Evelyn Grant, the widow. Evelyn sat apart, composed in her black silk, though the dress had been donned hastily. The pearls at her throat betrayed nothing of haste, each bead immaculate. She looked at Poirot with eyes that seemed too calm, as though grief had been stored away like winter coats. Madam, Poirot said gently, seating himself opposite. You are most brave. To speak so soon, it is not easy. But I must ask, in the days before this tragedy, how was Monsieur Grant? She pressed her lips together. Worried. That is the truth. He had spoken of debts, of investments gone badly. I told him he mustn't brood, but he, Harold, was a man who hated to lose. It preyed upon him. Poirot tilted his head. He was a man exact in detail, yes? His shoes polished, his accounts balanced. And yet, he brooded, he despaired. Evelyn's composure flickered. It does not suit him, you mean? No, it did not. But people change, Monsieur Poirot. Age, pressure, disappointment, they alter even the strongest. Poirot noted the slight curve of her smile when she said disappointment. He observed too that she avoided the word husband, referring to Harold always by name. He did not press her further. Instead he bowed, murmured condolences, and moved to the next. Richard Hale, the business partner. Richard Hale arrived from the neighboring guest house, his cheeks ruddy from drink or perhaps nerves. A large man, poorly fitted to his jacket, he attempted joviality, only to collapse into sullenness when it failed. A dreadful business, he said, running a finger inside his collar. The poor chap must have snapped. No other explanation. Indeed. Poirot's tone was mild. And yet you were his partner, monsieur. Would you not have seen signs of despair? Richard shifted. Well, yes, he'd been touchy. Short-tempered. Talked of calling in loans, selling shares. I told him he was overreacting. Things always look blacker at night, don't they? He attempted a laugh that withered instantly. Poirot leaned forward, his moustaches gleaming like bayonets in miniature. And tell me, monsieur, if he sold, who stood to suffer most? Richard's face reddened further. We all had something in the pot. I won't deny it, I'd have felt it. But dash it all, I wouldn't push a man off his balcony for that. Of course not, said Poirot soothingly. Murder is seldom committed for such simple sums. It is committed for pride, for desperation, for secrets. We shall see which it was here. Hale gulped brandy the butler had set near him and avoided Poirot's eyes. Clara Simmons, the maid. Clara entered reluctantly, her hands worrying at the edge of her apron. She was slight, barely 20, with a face that spoke of long hours and little rest. Her eyes darted between Poirot and the inspector as if seeking which master to please. Do not be afraid, mademoiselle, Poirot said kindly. Sit. Breathe. It is only us here, and we are not lions. You saw something, perhaps? Heard something? Her hands twisted tighter. I was in the morning room. I thought I heard, well, like a scrape. Then later the fall. When I looked out, she swallowed hard. I ran. Poirot's gaze was gentle but unrelenting. And before? Did Monsieur Grant quarrel with anyone? Clara hesitated. I shouldn't say. It isn't my place. It is your place to speak truth, Poirot murmured. Courage, ma petite. Who quarrelled with him? Her voice dropped. Mr. Hale. I heard them in the study last night. Arguing over money. Mr. Grant said he'd expose him. He said he'd not be made a fool. Poirot did not glance at Hale, though he sensed the man bristling. Instead, he touched Clara's hand briefly. Merci. You have done well. For now, keep what you know between us, yes? The truth is safe in my keeping. She nodded, wide-eyed, as though he had lifted a weight from her shoulders. Michael Grant, the estranged son. Finally came Michael Grant, the son. Tall, dark-haired, with the sharpness of youth but an edge of arrogance that carried poorly in the heavy room. His clothes were fashionable yet careless, his cuff showed 2 buttons fastened, one conspicuously absent. Poirot's eyes, though he said nothing, did not miss it. My father and I, Michael began, before anyone asked, were not close. I admit that freely. But I didn't wish him dead. You must understand, I only returned because, well, it was time. We quarrelled years ago. It seemed we might make peace. Did you? Poirot's tone was even. Michael shrugged. Hardly. He accused me of waste, of idleness. I told him he was a tyrant. Nothing new. He looked away, jaw tight. If you think I pushed him. Poirot raised a hand. I think nothing yet, monsieur. I only notice. For example, your jacket, it misses a button, does it not? Michael glanced down, coloured, and tugged his sleeve. I lost it in the garden earlier. A trifle. A trifle, Poirot repeated softly. Often murder hides itself beneath trifles. But let us not accuse before the music has begun. Poirot reflects. When the household had been excused, Poirot stood before the fire, his small figure casting a neat shadow against the mantel. Collingwood approached, notebook ready. Well, the inspector asked. Do we have our man? Poirot pursed his lips. Mon cher, we have only opened the book. Each person writes a line in it, but the chapter is not yet complete. He tapped his temple with one finger. Consider. Madame Evelyn, so calm, so composed, yet too composed, perhaps? Monsieur Hale, sweating over money, and now the maid whispers of fraud. Mademoiselle Clara, fearful, but her fear may be for more than secrets. And the son, the son with the missing button. He quarrels, yes. But is he murderer, or merely unlucky in manner? He turned to the inspector, eyes gleaming. Suicide, no. Already I am certain. The geometry does not lie. But which of these for pushed? That is the melody we must learn to hear. Collingwood grunted. You'll have a hard time of it. They've all motive enough. Motives are like hats in a shop window, Poirot said lightly. Many may fit, but only one has been worn. We must discover whose head it crowned. He paced the room with small, precise steps. Tomorrow, we will speak again with each. We will search not for grand statements, but for trifles. A word misplaced, a gesture too careful. In trifles, the truth dances. As he spoke, Evelyn re-entered quietly, a tray of coffee borne by Fraser at her side. Her poise was once more immaculate, her voice even. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector, you must be weary. Will you take refreshment? Poirot smiled courteously, though his eyes lingered on the steady hand that poured without tremor. Merci, madame. I accept. It is as I always say, the stomach, it too must be consulted in times of crisis. A little coffee, a little pastry, and the little grey cells begin their work. And as the steam curled from his cup, Poirot thought of buttons and gilded rails, of smoke on the air and varnish beneath nails, and knew the path ahead was narrowing toward the truth. Chapter 4, Clues in the Study. The morning after Harold Grant's fatal fall dawned grey, the mist still clinging to the cliffs as though reluctant to surrender its secrets. Hercule Poirot breakfasted with deliberate neatness at the Westport Hotel, one roll, precisely buttered, 1 cup of coffee, black, stirred 3 times clockwise. He then presented himself at Grant Manor, shoes polished like mirrors, moustaches immaculate, eyes gleaming with the anticipation of fresh clues. Inspector Collingwood awaited him in the hall, looking somewhat less composed, his coat still carrying the damp of the morning air. The study's been left exactly as it was, he said, his voice low, respectful of the widow who sat unseen in a distant room. Fraser barred the door after the doctor left. Thought you'd want to see it before we touched a thing. Poirot inclined his head. Fraser is wise. He knows that order, once disturbed, never quite returns. Let us go, mon ami. The dead man's room may speak more clearly than his widow or his friends. The study unveiled. The study smelled faintly of pipe smoke, old leather, and the salt that drifted in through cracks of old windows. Its walls were lined with dark books, mostly ledgers and law volumes, their spines serious and weighty. A heavy desk dominated the center, its surface cluttered not with disorder but with layers of intention, papers arranged in neat stacks, pens aligned, blotter unsmudged. Poirot paused just inside the doorway, his eyes narrowing. You see, Inspector? Even in his study, Monsieur Grant was exact. Everything has its place, its symmetry. Such men do not throw themselves from balconies in chaos. They seek order, even in despair. Collingwood grunted. Or they tidy up before they do the deed. Poirot lifted one delicate hand. Perhaps. But order does not erase the mark of conflict. Let us look. Letters and ink. On the desk lay a bundle of correspondence. Poirot examined each envelope with the care of a man appraising jewels. Most were unopened, their seals intact, addressed in the impersonal script of banks and solicitors. But one lay torn roughly, as though opened in agitation. Poirot slid the sheet free, smoothing it flat with his fingertips. The letter was from a London broker, outlining the collapse of certain investments. There was loss, yes, serious loss, but not ruin. The tone was firm but not catastrophic. And yet, Poirot murmured, we are told Monsieur Grant was consumed by despair over his finances. This letter, it does not sing of ruin. It sings only of inconvenience. Collingwood frowned. Perhaps he feared disgrace. Ah, but disgrace does not make a man careless with his money. Look! Poirot pointed to a heavy ink blot in the center of the page. The pen hesitates, the hand wavers. He stopped here, to think. This is not the writing of despair, it is the writing of decision. Perhaps he meant to reply, perhaps to act. But suicide? None. Poirot folded the letter carefully and replaced it. His eye scanned the desk once more, alighting upon a tumbler pushed half out of alignment with the other objects. He lifted it, sniffed delicately, and smiled faintly. Whiskey. But see, only half drunk. The rim holds the print of lips, but not Monsieur Grant's. He smoked cigars, did he not? His lips would leave traces of tobacco. This glass belongs to another. He held it up so that the morning light caught the faintest smudge of rouge. And this other, Inspector, is perhaps a lady. Collingwood shifted. The widow. Poirot shook his head. Madame Grant detests smoke and spirits. She said so herself. No, this glass tells us of a guest. A guest Monsieur Grant did not expect to linger, for else the maid would have brought another glass, eh? We must ask who shared his drink last night. The locked drawer. Poirot turned his attention to the desk drawers. Most opened easily, revealing bills, receipts, and the tidy detritus of a business life. But the lowest drawer on the right resisted, locked. Poirot tried the key in the blotter drawer, found it did not fit, and then looked around the study. On the mantel lay a silver box, the kind used to hold matches. He lifted it, shook it gently, and heard the faintest rattle. Inside, tucked beneath a layer of spent matches, lay a small key. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Always, the exact man hides his key where he alone can find it. But death, it betrays such cleverness. The drawer opened with a reluctant groan. Inside were bundles of papers bound with string, but one packet lay looser, as if rifled. Poirot drew it out. It contained drafts of a new will, unsigned but annotated in Harold Grant's strong, neat hand. The amendments were striking. The widow, Evelyn, would receive a comfortable annuity but not the whole estate. The bulk was to be held in trust for Michael, the estranged son, provided he reformed his conduct. Richard Hale, the business partner, was to be cut out entirely, his promised share dissolved. Poirot tapped the papers. Voila! A motive for everyone, Inspector. The wife, deprived of fortune. The partner, ruined. The son, enriched, but only if he obeys. What man likes to be corrected from beyond the grave? Collingwood's brow furrowed. So all three had cause. That makes the water no clearer. Poirot's moustaches quivered with amusement. Ah, but it is precisely in muddied water that the fish betrays itself. We will let them swim, and the ripples will tell us which is guilty. Small things, large meaning. Poirot closed the drawer and looked about once more. His gaze fell upon the carpet by the hearth. There, almost invisible against the weave, lay a matchstick not entirely burnt. He bent, retrieved it, and examined the end. This, Inspector, is Turkish tobacco. Monsieur Grant did not smoke such things. But someone in this house does. I smelled it on the balcony last night. The study confirms it. He placed the matchstick with his other treasures, fibres, button, flake of varnish, each one a thread in his invisible tapestry. Poirot then stepped back, surveying the room as a whole. Consider, my friend. A letter of financial woe, but not ruin. A glass half drunk by another hand. A will rewritten, altering fates. A foreign cigarette, smoked in secret. And a locked drawer, opened with cunning. Collingwood muttered, all the makings of mischief. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Of murder, mon ami. Murder that dresses itself as despair. But see, already the costume phrase. The thread of truth peeps through. Poirot's quiet conclusion. They left the study, locking the door once more. As they walked down the corridor, Poirot tapped his cane lightly upon the carpet, each step as deliberate as a metronome. Inspector, he said softly, do not permit yourself to be hurried. Everyone in this house has secrets. Madame fears disgrace, Monsieur Hale fears exposure, young Michael fears judgment. Even the maid, she fears something, though not for herself. We must listen to their fears, for in fear lies motive. And motive, coupled with opportunity, yields murder. Collingwood looked at him, half admiring, half weary. And where will you begin? Poirot smiled, his moustaches arching like a pair of wings. With the psychology, Tuges. The heart speaks before the lips, and the hands betray before the mouth denies. I shall ask nothing, yet they shall tell me everything. That is the art, mon ami. And tonight, when I put the little things together, the button, the scuff, the glass, I shall see the whole picture. He paused, turning his head slightly toward the closed study door. For the dead man has told us already, he did not leap. He was pushed. And the study, it sings of betrayal. With that, Poirot descended the stairs, immaculate as ever, while the sea beyond the cliffs heaved in its endless rhythm, steady, patient, waiting for the truth to surface. Chapter 5, The Psychology of Fear. The mist lifted from Westport by the following afternoon, giving way to a pale September sun that cast the manor in uncompromising light. Its golden balcony no longer glimmered romantically, it looked instead like a stage upon which a grim drama had played. Hercule Poirot, neat as a pin in a dove-grey suit, took his place in the morning room with the air of a man preparing for a recital. Inspector Collingwood lingered nearby, notebook ready, though he suspected Poirot valued observation above ink. Today, Poirot announced with cheerful solemnity, we examine not the footprints, nor the rails, nor the buttons. None, today we examine the mind. For murder, my friend, is written first in the heart before it stains the hands. A conversation with Clara. Clara Simmons entered nervously, her apron freshly pressed yet clutched in trembling fingers. She perched on the edge of the chair opposite Poirot, as though prepared to flee at the first harsh word. "Do not be afraid, mademoiselle," Poirot began gently. "We are but three here, you, myself, and the inspector, who is kind, though he hides it with his moustache." Collingwood grunted, to Clara's faint smile. "Tell me, what do you fear in this house?" Clara's eyes widened. "Fear, sir?" "Why, nothing, except," she broke off, twisting her apron. "Ah," said Poirot softly. "There is always an except. You must trust me. It is fear that locks the lips, and it is fear we must chase away." Clara hesitated, then whispered, "I fear the mistress, sir. Not for myself, she has never raised a hand to me, but for what she might do to others. She is cold, like stone." When Mr. Grant spoke against her, her eyes went hard. "Like glass that could cut." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And when did he speak against her?" "Yesterday morning, sir. I was polishing the banisters upstairs, and I heard raised voices from their room. He said he would change the will. She said he would regret it. After that, they were quiet, but the way she came out, she was pale, her lips tight. I swear, sir, it frightened me." Poirot inclined his head. "You have been brave to tell us. Keep your courage, mademoiselle. Fear, when hidden, grows monstrous. When spoken, it loses power." Clara's shoulders loosened, as if he had freed her of a burden. She thanked him softly and withdrew, leaving Poirot with his thoughts. Evelyn Grant's composure. Evelyn entered moments later, her black dress faultless, her pearls precisely spaced. She carried herself like a queen among supplicants, but her eyes darted briefly to the inspector before settling on Poirot. "You wish to speak with me again, Monsieur Poirot?" "If you please, madam." He gestured to the chair Clara had vacated. "We spoke yesterday of your husband's worries. But I must ask, what did you fear in recent days?" Evelyn's lips curved faintly. "Fear? I have none. A wife stands by her husband in all things. If he was troubled, I endured it quietly. I have no fear now, save the sorrow of widowhood." Poirot studied her, the tilt of her chin, the stillness of her hands. "And yet, others tell me there were quarrels." She stiffened. "Servants exaggerate. A word here, a phrase there, what do they understand of marriage? Yes, Harold and I disagreed. Every couple does." He had grown harsh of late, irritable. "That is all." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Madam, you are very controlled." "Too controlled, perhaps. Grief is not so precise. It weeps, it rails, it falters. But you sit as if carved from marble. Why is that?" Her composure cracked for the briefest second. A flicker, anger, or fear, or both. Then the mask returned. "You insult me, Monsieur Poirot. Not everyone displays grief alike. Some of us must remain strong for the sake of others." Poirot bowed his head courteously. "Forgive me. I observe only. You are indeed strong, madam, stronger than many men." When she had gone, Collingwood muttered, "You rattled her." Poirot smiled faintly. One rattles a cage to see which bird flies out first. Richard Hale's discomfort. Richard Hale entered next, perspiration already beading his brow though the day was cool. He sank heavily into the chair, his large hands fidgeting. "Mr. Hale," Poirot said lightly, "tell me, what weighs most upon you now?" "Fear, perhaps." "Fear? Nonsense," Hale blustered. "Only shock, grief. Poor Harold, a good man." "A good man, perhaps, but one who threatened to expose you." Poirot's voice was soft, but the words struck like stones. Hale started, colour rising. Who told you that? Does it matter? We know. He meant to reveal your little, irregularities. You feared ruin, did you not? Hale's hands tightened. Yes, he threatened. But Harold would never have gone through with it. He was bluff and bluster, always. He'd sooner cut off his hand than drag his partner to the gallows. Then why? Poirot asked gently, do you sweat so, monsieur? A man who fears nothing does not perspire at the memory of threats. Hale wiped his forehead. I'm not afraid. Only ashamed. I was foolish. But murder? No, never that. Poirot let the silence stretch. Hale shifted, floundered, then begged to be excused. Collingwood shook his head. If that man's innocent, he's the worst liar I've ever seen. Perhaps, Inspector. Or perhaps he lies about money, not about murder. We shall see. Michael Grant's defiance. The final interview was with Michael Grant. He entered briskly, almost defiantly, his youthful arrogance like armor. He took the chair without invitation and met Poirot's gaze directly. You think I killed him, he said. I can see it in your eyes. Poirot lifted a hand. I think nothing, monsieur. I only ask. What do you fear? Michael laughed sharply. Fear? My father, always. He never trusted me, never forgave me for leaving. Even now, in death, he controls me, his will, his rules. Fear? Yes, I feared his shadow would follow me forever. Poirot nodded. And last night, when you quarrelled, what then? Michael coloured. We shouted, yes. He said I was worthless. I said he was a tyrant. That was all. Was it? Poirot's eyes flicked briefly to the missing button on Michael's cuff. For a quarrel leaves traces. Sometimes a word, sometimes a mark. Sometimes a button. Michael tugged at his sleeve, his voice rising. It proves nothing. I lost it in the garden. Anyone could have dropped a button. Poirot remained serene. Just so. Anyone. Yet you tremble when I mention it. Why? Michael pushed back his chair. Because I'm sick of being accused. First by him, now by you. I didn't kill my father. He strode out, leaving the door swinging. Poirot reflects again. When they were alone once more, Poirot smoothed his moustache with delicate fingers. So, Inspector, what have we learned? Madame Evelyn fears disgrace, but hides it in marble calm. Monsieur Hale fears exposure and sweats under its weight. The son fears his father's judgment even in death, and protests too loudly. And the maid fears the mistress more than the murderer himself. Voila! The psychology of fear, it tells us who trembles, who sweats, who rages, who hardens. Collingwood frowned. But which fear pushed Harold Grant from the balcony? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Patience, mon ami. Fear shows us where to look. Soon we shall see who feared most of all, and who feared being discovered. He rose, his silhouette neat against the pale window. Outside, the sun lit the gilded balcony, making it shine once more. Yet to Poirot, it gleamed not with beauty, but with truth, truth waiting to be revealed. Chapter 6, Red Herrings and Revelations. By evening the house had settled into a strained quiet, as though the walls themselves were listening. Poirot and Inspector Collingwood returned to the drawing-room after a day of questioning, the air heavy with unspoken suspicion. Poirot sat primly in an armchair, shoes aligned precisely, fingertips pressed together as if balancing an invisible scale. Each of them has cause, Collingwood muttered, pacing near the fire. The widow with her fortune reduced, the partner with his fraud, the son with his temper. And the maid, well, she knows more than she says. I can't make sense of it. Poirot smiled faintly. That is because, mon ami, you seek the straight road, while murder prefers the crooked lane. It leaves us red herrings, false trails, to amuse itself. The case against Hale. Later that night, Collingwood had Richard Hale brought once more into the study. The man appeared more dishevelled than before, his tie loosened, his eyes bloodshot from brandy or sleeplessness. He slumped heavily into the chair. You've been cooking your books, Collingwood began sharply. Grant knew it. The maid overheard your quarrel. Seems clear enough to me. Hale flushed. Yes, I doctored accounts. A foolish risk. But Harold would never have gone to the authorities, he'd have hated the scandal. He only threatened to scare me into honesty. Poirot raised a brow. Threats, monsieur, are like daggers. They may wound before they strike. And a man who fears ruin may grow desperate. Hale's face twisted. Desperate, yes. Murderous, no. You must believe me. He slammed his hand against the desk for emphasis. I'm no saint, but I didn't push him. Poirot's eyes lingered on the hand, no scratches, no gilded flecks, no missing button. He filed the detail away. When Hale had gone, Collingwood scowled. If that man isn't guilty, he's doing a fine job of looking it. Ah, said Poirot softly, but guilt in money is not guilt in murder. He sweats at disgrace, not at death. The widow's secret. The next morning, Poirot requested Evelyn Grant's company in the conservatory, where the faint scent of roses still lingered despite the season. She entered with her usual composure, her morning dress pristine, her pearls catching the light like droplets of frost. Madam, Poirot said gently, you loved your husband. Her expression barely flickered. I respected him. That is enough. Poirot nodded as if satisfied. And yet, you possessed a second key to his private drawer. Her hand froze on the armrest. How? Ah, it is a small thing, easily overlooked. But small things, they are my speciality. Poirot leaned forward. Why conceal it, madam? Why pretend you never entered his study? Her lips pressed thin. Because I knew of the will, she admitted at last. He told me only 2 nights ago. He meant to reduce my inheritance. To humiliate me. I could not bear for the servants to know, nor for Mr. Hale to sneer. So yes, I lied about the key. But I did not kill him. You must believe that. Poirot observed her face carefully, the cold anger beneath the calm, the pride that would rather lie than confess vulnerability. I believe you are a woman of strength, he said softly. But strength, madam, can cut both ways. It shields, or it strikes. She rose, chin high. I shielded myself, Monsieur Poirot. Nothing more. With that, she left him to his thoughts. Collingwood exhaled. So she had motive, means, opportunity. What more do you need? Evidence, Inspector. Always evidence. And psychology, her pride is a sharper weapon than money. She might conceal disgrace, yes. But would she sully her hands with violence? Perhaps. Perhaps not. A midnight discovery. That evening Poirot requested solitude in the study once more. The house had grown still, the servants dismissed to their quarters. He set a candle upon the desk and began to walk slowly about the room, observing what the daylight had disguised. Near the hearth he knelt, running a hand lightly across the rug. Something glittered faintly. With a pair of tweezers, he lifted a small metallic shard, so small it could be mistaken for dust. Under the candlelight it gleamed unmistakably, a flake of gilt. Poirot's moustaches twitched. So. The struggle in the study before the balcony. Monsieur Grant clutched at his attacker and in so doing scraped gold from a cufflink or a button. Very neat, very damning. He placed the flake with his growing collection of trifles. Always the murderer leaves behind his calling card, however small. Clara's confession. The following day Poirot sought Clara again, this time in the kitchen where she was polishing silver. She started when he entered, nearly dropping a spoon. Mademoiselle, Poirot said softly, I will not scold you for silence yesterday. But I ask again, what do you hide? Her eyes brimmed with tears. I saw more than I told you. Last night, before it happened, I was passing near the study. I heard Mr. Grant's voice raised, saying he would not change his mind. Then another voice, harsh, demanding. I dared not look in, but I saw a shadow on the curtain. Tall, broad. Mr. Hale. Poirot suggested. She shook her head fiercely. No, sir. It was younger. More upright. I believe it was Mr. Michael. Poirot's eyes glinted. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. Michael's unease. That afternoon Poirot confronted Michael in the garden. The young man was pacing, cigarette in hand. The smoke drifted towards Poirot, who sniffed delicately. Turkish, Poirot said. A rare taste in England. Yet the same I smelled in the study, and on the balcony. Michael stiffened. Lots of people smoke them. Poirot raised his brows. But only you in this house, n'est-ce pas? Your father smoked cigars. Your mother detests smoke. Hale favors pipes. The maid cannot afford such luxuries. So, it is you. Michael's defiance wavered. All right, I smoke them. What of it? Poirot's gaze lingered on the missing button from his jacket cuff. A man may lose a button in the garden, yes. But when the button is found near the place his father fell, that is not so simple. You quarrelled with him, did you not? Michael's face flushed. Yes, we quarrelled. He called me a wastrel. I called him a tyrant. But I didn't kill him. You must believe me. Poirot studied him in silence, noting the trembling hand, the darting eyes. At last he said, I believe, monsieur, that you are frightened. But of what? Of guilt or a discovery? Michael turned away without answering. Poirot's reflection. That night Poirot and Collingwood sat once more in the drawing room. The fire crackled softly, shadows playing upon the walls. We have a tapestry of motives, Poirot said thoughtfully. Monsieur Hale, ruined if exposed. Madame Evelyn, humiliated by the will. Michael, embittered son, his pride wounded, his fortune uncertain. Even the maid, afraid for reasons we do not yet fully see. Each has cause, each has opportunity. But the murderer has also left behind traces, a button, a cigarette, a flake of gilt. These are not red herrings, Inspector. These are truths disguised as trifles. Collingwood frowned. But who's to say which belong to which? They all point at the sun, but that seems too easy. Doesn't it? Poirot smiled, his eyes twinkling. Ah, you are learning, mon ami. Murder is vain, it enjoys its little performances, its false trails. But vanity leaves its own cracks. Soon, we shall see through them. Already, the red herrings swim more slowly. The revelations, they come closer. He rose, smoothing his moustache with delicate precision. Tomorrow, we shall gather them all. And then, perhaps, the murderer will reveal himself, not in words, but in silence. And as the fire burned low, Poirot's mind arranged its fragments: a widow too calm, a partner too desperate, a son too defensive, a maid too fearful. Somewhere among them lay the truth, waiting to be unveiled with one final tug of the thread. Chapter 7: The Gathering Storm. The sea had turned restless by the next day, rolling in heavy waves that broke against the cliffs with a sound like distant cannon fire. Grant Manor stood stubbornly above the turmoil, but inside the house the atmosphere was equally unsettled. Servants whispered in corridors, doors closed more sharply than they opened, and every glance seemed charged with suspicion. Hercule Poirot, however, moved through it all with the serenity of a man preparing for an elaborate performance. Inspector Collingwood found him in the library, standing before a tall window and polishing his moustache with immaculate care. "They're all on edge," Collingwood muttered. "The widow barely speaks, the son prowls like a caged fox, and Hale's half in his cups. The maid looks ready to bolt at every footstep. If we don't resolve this soon, the lot of them will tear each other apart." Poirot smiled faintly. "Yes, the storm gathers. But do not fear, mon ami. In the storm's heart, the truth will flash like lightning." Evelyn's defiance. That afternoon, Evelyn Grant sought Poirot out in the small morning room. She stood framed by the pale curtains, her black gown catching the sun so it shimmered like a raven's wing. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice firm, "this questioning cannot go on. The servants are uneasy, the neighbors gossip. I must insist you declare Harold's death for what it was, a suicide. To drag our name through scandal would be cruel." Poirot inclined his head politely. "And yet, madam, truth is never cruel. It is the fossard that wounds most deeply. Forgive me, but I cannot call it suicide. The evidence, it sings a different song." Her eyes hardened. "Then I must protect what remains of our dignity myself." "Madam," Poirot said softly, "you are a woman of strength. But strength can also blind. Beware that in protecting dignity you do not protect guilt." She gave a short, sharp laugh. "You speak in riddles, monsieur. Perhaps you enjoy tormenting us." Without another word, she swept from the room, leaving behind the faintest trace of perfume and defiance. Hale's desperation. Richard Hale was found in the billiard room, a brandy glass in hand, his tie loose and his expression haggard. When Poirot and Collingwood entered, he attempted a jovial smile that collapsed almost instantly. "Still sniffing about, eh?" Hale muttered. "Why not put it down to despair and have done with it? Harold was under pressure, any man might break." "But you, monsieur," Poirot said gently, "you were under greater pressure still. The fraud, though you I? If it came to light, ruin, disgrace, perhaps even prison." Hale slammed his glass upon the table, the liquid sloshing over the green baize. "I told you before. I didn't kill him. I might have cheated him, yes. But murder? I haven't the stomach for it." "Yet you had the shadow upon the curtain," Poirot remarked calmly. "The maid swears she saw it. A tall figure, broad of shoulder, in the study with him that night." Hale's face contorted. "Lies. I wasn't there. I was in my room, writing letters. Ask anyone." Said Poirot, "but the study tells us there was a struggle." "Someone else was there, certainly. If not you, then who? That is the question which torments you, n'est-ce pas? For the shadow might as easily be mistaken." Hale swallowed hard, looking away. "Then find the one who was there." "But I swear it was not me." Poirot studied him a moment longer, then turned away. Hale's fear was real, but it was not the fear of guilt. It was the fear of a man cornered by his own dishonesty, yet innocent of the larger crime. Clara's terror. Later, Poirot sought Clara Simmons in the servants' hall. She was polishing silver with nervous vigor, her small frame taut as a bowstring. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "you must be honest with me now. You fear someone in this house very deeply. Whom do you fear?" She froze, then whispered, "The mistress, sir. Mrs. Grant. She looks at me as if she knows what I've overheard. I can't sleep, for fear she broke off, wringing her hands. I shouldn't say more." Poirot's eyes softened. "Courage, ma petite. It is not Madame you fear. It is the murderer. And once the murderer is revealed, your fear will vanish." "But if it is Mrs. Grant?" Clara whispered. "Then she too will be revealed," Poirot assured her. "The guilty cannot hide forever. Remember that." Clara nodded, though tears glistened in her eyes. Poirot left her polishing, her small hands trembling with every stroke. Michael's restlessness. Michael Grant had taken to walking the gardens at night. Poirot observed him from the library window, a slim figure pacing along the gravel path, cigarette glowing like a firefly in the dusk. Collingwood joined him, frowning. "He's restless, that one. Like he's waiting for something, or hiding it." "Oh, Poirot murmured. "The cigarette, the missing button, the quarrel. All point to him. Too neatly, perhaps. One must beware when the path is so straight, it may lead to a trap." When Michael returned inside, Poirot intercepted him. "You do not sleep, monsieur?" Michael scowled. "How could I, with suspicion hanging over me like a noose?" "Suspicion, yes. But innocence does not pace the garden at midnight." Michael's eyes flashed. "Better than sitting under your gaze while you weigh us like criminals. I did not kill my father. I hated him, yes, but I didn't kill him." Poirot regarded him calmly. "Hatred is dangerous, monsieur. But so is fear. Which drives you more?" Michael gave no answer. He stalked away, shoulders tense, leaving behind only the faint scent of Turkish smoke. Poirot's quiet watch. That night, Poirot sat alone in the study, a candle flickering upon the desk. Before him lay his small envelopes, the button, the fibres, the varnish flake, the gilt, the matchstick. Each was a silent witness, waiting to speak. He placed them in a row, touching each in turn. The button, betrayal of struggle. The cigarette, betrayal of taste. The varnish, betrayal of vanity. The gilt, betrayal of violence. All small, all trivial, yet together they sing. Ah, but the melody is not yet complete. The house creaked around him, wind battering the shutters. Poirot folded his hands and closed his eyes, listening not to sound but to silence. In that silence, the pieces aligned. The summons. The next morning, Poirot addressed Collingwood with brisk certainty. "It is time, mon ami. We shall gather them all in the drawing-room tonight. Each has told me enough, through words, through silences, through fears. The murderer is among them, and he shall be revealed." Collingwood looked sceptical. "Already? You've no confession, no witness." Poirot smiled. "Confession will come. Witness, we already have, the trifles. Tonight, the storm will break, and the truth will flash. You shall see." And so the summons went out. At 8 o'clock, the household would assemble in the great drawing-room. Evelyn received it with cold dignity, Hale with visible dread, Michael with defiance, Clara with trembling hands. Each returned to their chamber to await the appointed hour, while the wind howled outside and the sea struck hard at the cliff, as if demanding the truth itself. Poirot, serene as ever, prepared for the evening as if for a grand performance. He polished his shoes, arranged his moustache with precision, and straightened his tie until the knot was perfect. For tonight, the curtain would rise, and Hercule Poirot would unveil his masterpiece, The Unmasking of a Murderer. Chapter 8. Poirot Explains All. At precisely 8 o'clock, the household of Grant Manor assembled in the drawing-room. The storm outside pressed hard against the windows, the wind rattling them like impatient fingers. A fire had been lit, but its warmth did little to ease the chill of expectation. Evelyn sat straight-backed in a high chair, pearls glowing pale against her morning dress. Richard Hale leaned against the mantel, eyes darting, glass in hand. Michael paced restlessly, hands buried in his pockets, while Clara perched nervously on the edge of a low seat, fingers worrying at her apron. Poirot stood before the fire, immaculate in a dark suit, his moustaches gleaming like twin sabres. Inspector Collingwood hovered by the door, notebook ready, though he knew Poirot needed no notes. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm yet carrying easily above the storm, "we are here tonight not merely to grieve poor Monsieur Grant, but to discover the truth of his death. The police would have you believe it was suicide. But suicide, none. The little details, they cry out against it." He raised a finger. A scuff upon the gilded rail, showing the mark of struggle. A button torn loose, found by the balcony doors. A cigarette of Turkish tobacco, smoked by only one among you. A flake of varnish, clear, from a manicured fingernail. And at last, a speck of gilt caught beneath the fingernails of the dead man himself, where he clawed at his attacker. Together, these trifles compose the truth. A silence fell, heavy as the sea outside. Poirot let it linger before continuing. Clearing the red herrings. "First, let us consider Monsieur Hale," Poirot said, turning towards the partner. "You quarrelled with Harold Grant over your dishonest accounts. You had motive, yes. But when I examine you, I see only the fear of disgrace. You lie over money, monsieur, but not over murder. Your hands bear no scratches, no missing button, no guilt. You are guilty of fraud, but not of killing." Hale sagged against the mantel, relief and shame mingling on his face. Poirot next addressed Evelyn, who sat motionless, her eyes cold. "Madam, you concealed knowledge of the will. You possessed a second key to your husband's drawer. You had reason to hate the prospect of humiliation, reason to wish your husband dead. And yet, your pride, it is too great. A woman who detests smoke, who would not sully her hands even with dust, would she grapple with a man upon a balcony? None. You lied to protect your dignity, not because you pushed him." Evelyn's lips tightened, but she inclined her head, accepting Poirot's verdict like a queen dismissing a subject. "And Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot said kindly, turning to the maid, "you heard quarrels, you saw shadows, you trembled with fear. But your fear was not for yourself. You feared the weight of secrets, the wrath of your mistress, the shadow of suspicion. You are innocent, ma petite." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, "Thank you, sir." The accusation. Poirot now turned his gaze upon Michael, who stood stiff, jaw tight, eyes flashing defiance. "And so, we arrive at the sun. You quarrelled with your father the very night he died. You alone smoked Turkish cigarettes, the same I smelled upon the balcony and in the study. You alone have a jacket missing a button, the very button found near the threshold. And when your father fought back, it was your cufflink, your gilt, that scraped against the rail. His cry, 'Let go of me,' was the cry of a man resisting his own son." Michael flushed crimson. "Lies. Circumstance. Anyone could have planted a button." Poirot raised his hand, silencing him. "Ah, but there is more. Your father's new will, he left you the bulk of the estate, yes, but only upon condition of reform. You, proud, restless, impatient, would not tolerate such shackles. You came to him in anger, demanded change, perhaps money. He refused. There was a struggle, in the study first, then upon the balcony. You pressed him back, he clawed at you, tearing the button, scraping the gilt. And then, you pushed. Michael's eyes blazed. No. He despised me, yes, but I would never. Poirot's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. You did. You sought to disguise it as despair, spreading whispers of debt and gloom. But the truth betrayed you in trifles. A button, a cigarette, a speck of gilt. The little grey cells do not lie. The breakdown. The storm howled louder, as if echoing the tension in the room. Michael's defiance faltered, his voice cracking. He gave me nothing. Nothing but scorn. He'd have left me penniless if I didn't dance to his tune. I wanted only to frighten him. To make him yield. I didn't mean. His words dissolved. He buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Evelyn gasped softly, though her eyes showed no tears. Hale muttered an oath, half pity, half disgust. Clara sobbed outright. Poirot regarded Michael gravely. You meant, monsieur, to assert your will. But violence, once begun, does not stop where one intends. Your father resisted, and in that moment, you became a murderer. Collingwood stepped forward, laying a firm hand upon Michael's arm. The young man did not resist. His confession, though broken, had been enough. Poirot's summation. Poirot turned back to the others, smoothing his moustache. And so, mesdames et messieurs, the mystery is resolved. Harold Grant did not leap to his death. He was pushed by his own son. The geometry of the fall, the button by the threshold, the cigarette ash in the study, the flake of gilt beneath the dead man's nails, all pointed here. The red herrings were many, but the truth, always, it reveals itself in the small things. He looked towards Evelyn. You are free of suspicion, madam, though not of sorrow. You must bear now not only widowhood, but the disgrace of a son's crime. Her face remained calm, but her voice trembled slightly. He was his father's son, after all. Pride bred pride. Poirot bowed his head. Perhaps. Yet pride does not excuse murder. The aftermath. Michael was taken into custody, his steps heavy, his face pale. Hale slumped in his chair, muttering of ruined fortunes. Evelyn sat rigid, pearls glinting like cold stars, her grief bound in steel. Clara wept quietly in the corner, relief mingled with sorrow. Poirot stood once more before the fire, speaking softly to Collingwood. It is always the little things, mon ami. Murderers believe themselves clever, but they forget trifles. A button, a cigarette, a flake of varnish, so small, yet so mighty. Without them, Harold Grant's death would have passed as suicide. With them, we reveal the hand that pushed him. Collingwood shut his notebook with a snap. I'll say this, Poirot, you've got a way of turning scraps into ropes. You've hanged a boy with nothing more than a button. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Non, Inspector. Not I. It was he who hanged himself when he thought no one would notice the little things. I merely observed. The storm outside began to ease, the wind softening, the sea drawing back its fury. In the stillness that followed, Poirot smoothed his moustache one final time and murmured, Justice, like the sea, is patient. It comes in waves. And tonight, it has come ashore at Grant Manor.